Sorry, I'm going to go on a mini tangent about this.
Please. Well, I brought it up. Go for it.
Last Jedi is a Pandora's box.
Welcome to the Crooked Table Podcast, where we discuss the world of film from a fresh angle. And now your host, Robert Yaniz Jr.
Welcome to the Crooked Table Podcast. This is Rob. On this show, we like to bring on fans, critics, pretty much anyone that has an appreciation for cinema, which, as we know, is pretty much everyone. It's kind of a universal art form at this point. And we bring them on to share their thoughts on a film that they love, really kind of democratizing the film criticism conversation and trying to bring in as many fresh voices as possible to kind of balance the negativity out there and really focus on the subjective nature of cinema. So this week I'm joined by Jackson Smith of Screen Fever and the Home Experience podcast. Jackson, welcome to the Crooked Table Podcast.
Thank you. I'm very, very honored to be on. I'm a huge fan of this podcast. So this is a long time coming, and this is a movie that I'm very, very excited to talk about. So.
Well, yeah. I mean, after I had the other half of your podcasting partner Adam Barnard on a few weeks ago, I mean, he was really trying to like make sure that we had this conversation. He actually suggested that that I reach out to you directly, and we had already been Facebook friends a little bit and things like that. And then this ended up working out perfectly with the film that you want to discuss. So why don't you tell listeners a little bit about who you are, what you have going on, and where they can find you and that kind of thing.
Yeah. So, my name is Jackson Smith. This last year, my friend and co-writer Adam Barnard and I, we started a channel on YouTube called Screen Fever, which is basically just a platform for us to discuss and analyze and talk about movies. We started a podcast called The Home Experience, which is basically aimed at movies available on the home market. So what we'll do is each couple of weeks, we'll pick a movie that's available to stream on Amazon or Hulu or Netflix. Just give our thoughts on it. I graduated from Chapman University with a degree in film production, so I'm also a filmmaker. I've been shopping my thesis around film festivals for over a year now. We're about to end our festival run next month. Working on a couple of new projects, trying to get off the ground. One of which I'm actually writing with Adam. So we're filmmakers and film critics. We're sort of trying to bridge that gap. We love talking about movies, but we also like taking our criticism of movies and putting that into practice and trying to make the movies that we want to see, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think, having you guys on has been really, really helpful in shaping this show and this new version of the show, in that you do bring that filmmaking perspective. You're not just, a lot of the people we've had on have been just fans of movies and just people, from my own personal life that I'm sort of just still trying to fine tune this new format and kind of, I guess, testing that on them a little bit. And you guys bring in an even more of a, you guys kind of lend a little bit more credibility to this show and kind of help me to give you're welcome. Give a little more diversity in voices. And that's the whole thing with Crooked Table. I'm trying to do the world of film from a fresh angle, and that definitely includes the filmmaking perspective. So I appreciate you bringing that to the conversation.
Well, thank you. Yeah, my sort of perspective on filmmaking and film criticism is that everybody's perspective has some sort of validity. Like whether you're a filmmaker or a casual film goer or a critic or whoever, you're gonna from whatever walk of life you come from, you're going to watch movies in a different way, not even necessarily in a worse way, but just in a different way. And I think, that's why I like this podcast so much, is because it's like you said, it's democratizing that and bringing all those perspectives in and sort of validating all of those perspectives. And I just think that's really cool because, like me being a filmmaker, like a lot of critics would say like, oh, well, you can't really criticize and talk about movies because you're a filmmaker. And I'm like, no, I think me, growing up in the industry and making movies, I would like to think it affords me a somewhat of a valuable perspective. I would like to think, but
absolutely.
That's why we started the channel and why we're doing the podcast.
So what do you, as a filmmaker, how do you see I guess, you're part of the community now, but as a filmmaker, how have you historically, I kind of viewed the film criticism community? Do you see, because I know it's very contentious. You've seen a lot of these kinds of things online between, especially now with social media, there's a lot of conversations back and forth between critics and actual filmmakers and kind of controversy there. So, can you speak to that a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, there is a lot of there's a lot of hostility towards film critics in industry circles. It's like, oh, the critics, they don't know what they're talking about. And yeah, I'm sort of on the other end of that spectrum. I really love film criticism. I think film criticism can be an art form in and of itself, like film theory and talking about and breaking down movies. Like a lot of times people hate critics and they hate criticism because they think they're like, oh, well, it sucks all the enjoyment out of watching a movie. And I'm like, no, for me, it's the opposite. Like knowing how movies work and knowing how to talk about movies, and what makes a movie good only makes me enjoy movies more. Like, I feel like the more I've listened to good critics and the more I've learned about film theory, like the more I end up enjoying movies, if that makes sense. I don't know if that makes me weird, but it certainly makes me weird within industry circles, but that's how I feel. And that's how I watch movies.
Yeah. And I think a lot of times film critics can be judged for kind of, I guess not taking a film for what it's trying to do. Like, I feel like, I think someone like Roger Ebert got some flack on and off throughout his career because he was given like high ratings to, I think he gave Blade 2 like 3.5 out of 4, things like that. And I feel like
Speed 2.
Yeah. Oh my God.
Speed
well,
2.
Speed 2.
I don't know why I know that, but I know.
I can't speak to that one. That I have
Blade
to disagree
2 is
with him.
Guillermo del Toro. That one's actually pretty good.
That is pretty good.
Speed 2 is, that was a controversial opinion at the time.
But like something like, Black Panther was one of my favorite movies of the year, but and that's one of the rare movies to kind of cross over between art and popular, popcorn entertainment. And I think a lot of times critics tend to put it in one camp or another and feel like, well, that was a big blockbuster from a big studio. That can't really have that much artistic merit to it, can it? That kind of thing. And I think that's part of the perspective that really kind of perpetuates that divide between things, where you see movies like Bohemian Rhapsody making so much money, and then meanwhile films like the one that we're talking about today, it made very relatively little at the box office, but it's like a critic's darling. And that's another thing that I think is valuable about the film that we're going to talk about, that it's we can shed a little more of a spotlight on it.
Totally. Yeah. I mean, it's funny because I feel like the consensus within not even film communities, but like the general public is that, oh, the critics never like popular movies. And that's just I mean, like, as you see with, Black Panther, I mean, basically anything Marvel's done, but like, Into the Spider-Verse, the last Mission Impossible movie. I mean, these are all movies that got like really incredible reviews from big publications and a lot of attention from big publications, in addition to being huge popular box office successes. Like the divide, I think, is a lot smaller than a lot of people make it out to be. I think movies that are enjoyable to a lot of people include critics a lot of the time, and people also forget how many quote unquote art house Sony critic movies don't get good reviews. Like, right. It's weirdly, the scales are pretty balanced when you actually look at it. But yeah, people like to think, oh, because the critics didn't like Venom and I liked Venom, therefore the critics have terrible taste or had their heads up their asses or whatever. And it's like, sometimes you've got a discrepancy, but I feel like most of the time, critics are people too. They like movies that are fun. They like movies that ring true to them. And yeah.
Yeah, no, totally. So before we get into, the film that we're going to talk about and kind of introduce that, I have to ask you, because Adam and I have had this contentious back and forth on The Last Jedi. Where do you stand on The Last Jedi? Do you stand on his side, or is it, am I alone here? What's the situation?
Oh my gosh. Should I say this in public? Last Jedi might be my favorite Star Wars movie.
Oh, okay,
I know I would get shot for saying that. I mean, here's the thing. Like, I saw Fantastic Beasts: The Crimes of Grindelwald this last year, and it was a huge awakening for me, because after I got out of that movie, it was like, oh my gosh, that's how everybody felt after Last Jedi. Like, oh, that's what it feels like to watch a franchise that you love go in a direction that you just don't agree with at all.
Right.
Granted that, I happen to think that Last Jedi is a good movie and Crimes of Grindelwald, even not as a Harry Potter fan, is a bad movie. But as a Harry Potter fan, I was very angry at that movie because I felt like it betrayed a lot of the core tenets of Harry Potter and like what made Harry Potter great. And that's a lot of what people felt after Last Jedi. So, so I really can't blame people when they say like, oh, they ruined Luke Skywalker. They totally messed up this franchise. But, personally, like that, just personally as Jackson Smith, like that movie was so emblematic of like what Star Wars is to me and what I think Star Wars is, and just landed totally on the spot that I think that franchise needed to land on to keep evolving and keep growing moving forward. And on top of it, I had a ridiculous amount of fun. I mean, it's just like moment to moment is such a fun Star Wars movie. So many great surprises in it. So many great character turns. Looks amazing as always. I love The Last Jedi.
Yeah, no,
I am a total Last Jedi apologist.
Yeah, same here. I mean, I think after The Force Awakens, everybody was concerned that there was just going to be like basically rehashes of the original trilogy, and The Last Jedi went totally the other direction. And it felt to me more kind of thoughtful in a lot of ways than a lot of the other films in the franchise, in that it was concerned with the power dynamic with Poe Dameron and like what it means to be a hero, and raising a lot of questions that the franchise hasn't really ever challenged before. They just kind of went with the template of A New Hope and, okay, this is good, this is evil, and let's just make sure we keep those lines clearly divided. And I think The Last Jedi really opened it up and kind of gave the series the propulsion it needed to get away from focusing on, oh, this is this one legacy and this one lineage and the Skywalker saga, which is supposedly going to be coming to a close in December with Episode 9. And I find the whole finale with Luke's sacrifice and
so good.
The kid with the broom, like that whole thing, basically like opening it up that anyone can be a Jedi and that kind of thing. So yeah, I really responded to it. And every time I watch it, I'm like, damn it, this movie is so good. Like, I feel like I love it more. And it's probably in my, I think right now it's like close between Empire, A New Hope, and Last Jedi.
Yeah,
but Last Jedi is like
always
moving
going to
up.
be a three-way. It's always going to be
much.
Same here. It's always going to be a three-way between those, because it's like, it's like we wouldn't have anything without New Hope. Empire is just Empire, but Last Jedi, I mean, like, and also, I feel like as much as I love Star Wars, and I love Star Wars, you kind of have to like take a distance with the franchise and say like, okay, this is a series about space wizards written for children, like even the good parts of the prequels are still like very childish, and like it's all sort of based in pop serials from the 40s and Flash Gordon, so it's like you're never supposed to take it particularly seriously. But like Last Jedi, even though it was moment to moment fun and awesome and cool, felt like it had such an intentional focus on character and theme and story and just great filmmaking that is shockingly rare in a franchise that is this popular amongst film nerds. Again, though, I love Star Wars, but it was really, really, that was just very, very gratifying to me as a filmmaker and and a film critic. I loved it. Yeah,
same. I'm really curious to see what they do with the next one. But yeah, so before we got to this movie, I just wanted to, I felt like I would be remiss if I didn't bring that up, because Adam and I talked about that a lot. So I was like, I was just curious. Okay, cool.
Yeah.
So this episode, we're going to be talking about one of 2018's most critically acclaimed films, 8th Grade, written and directed by Bo Burnham. So let's listen to a little bit of the trailer right now.
Hey guys, it's Kayla back with another video. So, the topic of today's video is being yourself. Being yourself can be hard, and it's like, aren't I always being myself? And yeah, for sure. But being yourself is like not changing yourself to impress someone else. A lot of people like call me quiet or shy or whatever, but I'm not quiet.
Most quiet, Kayla Day.
I don't talk a lot at school, but if people talk to me and stuff, they'd find out that I'm like really funny and cool and talkative. By the way, I like your shirt a lot. It's like so cool. What?
All right, so that was a little bit of the trailer for 8th Grade from writer-director Bo Burnham. So, Jackson, since you picked the film, do you want to tell listeners a little bit about what it is about and what they can expect, those who aren't familiar with it, of course?
Yeah, so I'm going to get a little vulnerable here. So I cry quite a bit during movies. And by cry, I mean, like, I'll shed a tear and I'll wipe it off and I'll say, like, oh, wow, that was very, very good, you know. And like that's my definition of crying during a movie, and I do that quite a bit, like basically every Pixar movie, every Hayao Miyazaki movie. At the end of 8th Grade, I was like belly sobbing for like 10 minutes. Like this movie broke something open inside of me is kind of the best way I can put it. Like I can look at it and say, oh wow, that was an objectively amazing movie, that was a great piece of filmmaking, but it more than I think any other movie last year felt like it was speaking directly to me and saying things directly to me, things that I didn't know needed to be said to me, and put me in a very, very vulnerable place. And I just applaud that so much. And I think a lot of that comes back to the filmmaking. A lot of that just comes back to how great of a job Bo Burnham did at capturing this very, very specific yet very, very universal aspect of childhood and this very, very specific time at which you sort of gain self-awareness. So it just meant a lot to me because that was just for me a very, very dark and influential time in my life. Even though I'm not Kayla, I know exactly what she feels throughout the whole movie. So that's why it rung so true to me personally.
Yeah, no, totally. And I mean, I had kind of a similar response to it. And, you know, when you mentioned that you wanted to talk about this film, I was actually really excited because I'd only seen it a few weeks ago because it was one I missed in theaters. And I wanted to make sure I caught up with before the end of the year. And it did end up ranking pretty high on my favorite films of 2018 list. And it's amazing how he brings together something that's such a universal, because I'm pretty sure Bo Burnham has never been a 13-year-old girl.
Pretty sure.
I can't speak 100% to that. But he captures something, he finds the universal truth beneath all of it, that this experience being that age, and he kind of brings it into the modern era, which I thought was really something that impressed me, because I'm 35. So when I was 13, we didn't have the internet, let alone Snapchat, YouTube, and all this stuff. But that also, that was a very pivotal time for me. And if I can get personal for a second, that was 13, right before, basically I was really close to my grandmother, and she passed away 10 days before my 13th birthday. Wow. And it was one of those, and I was a very like upbeat kid, like very hyper and all that kind of thing. And that experience, and I didn't come to realize until much later, really kind of changed me and kind of broke my innocence a little bit in a little way. And from that point on was where I really started to get hardcore into movies. Movies were my escape from all of that. So that's when I started to really follow the industry, really got into Oscars. So my obsession with movies is kind of born out of being this age and kind of just looking for a way out of myself, I guess. So it had that being 13 had kind of a pivotal shift for me personally. And I think this film really captures that kind of transitional phase in that, I guess we should just say the movie follows Elsie Fisher, who plays Kayla Day, who's in her last week of middle school. And, she has with the time capsules, which is, I think was a brilliant device to kind of give us, right. Which I think was a brilliant device to establish, who she was before she entered this like sort of awkward phase, and kind of her, her renewed hope for what the future might bring. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's I think the key connector between Kayla's 8th grade your eighth grade and my eighth grade. With me, middle school was when my best friend from elementary school moved away. So like seventh and eighth grade, I did not have any close friends at all. And I think that, that key is loneliness. I think there's an isolation at that age where you are trying to express yourself and trying to communicate with the world around you, but you don't have the tools and the awareness to do that properly. And it just, you spiral into this hole that I think you never really end up escaping from. I mean, I just know personally, that experience in middle school irrevocably changed me, and sounds like your experience irrevocably changed you. And, that's why I think the movie was so powerful for me, is because, I looked at this character and it's her last week of eighth grade. Like everything that happens in the movie is, she goes to a pool party and goes to a mall and graduates. Like that's the whole movie.
Right. Plot wise. Yeah.
I watched it almost like seeing her entire life in front of her and just feeling this, devastation at, what she could have been, if she hadn't sort of spiraled. And the movie does sort of land on an optimistic note, saying that she has made peace with herself and she has sort of learned to love herself. But, a lot of kids don't come to that realization until much later in life and have a lot of problems as a result of that, that trauma they experience. So, I mean, it's just very true in that sense, I mean, Bo Burnham was never an eighth grade girl, but I was listening to a podcast with him. I think it was the Mark Maron podcast. And he was talking about, when he was on tour, cause he's a stand-up comedian, he sort of had this massive panic attack on stage and, sort of had this career crisis when he was like, I think like my age, I think he was like 23 or something. And he started like going on YouTube and watching all of these videos, kind of like the ones Kayla is making in the movie, where it's just a girl speaking to a camera, giving the advice that she's trying to give herself. And and he was like, even though that wasn't me, I felt like that's exactly what I was trying to do. So it's like he isn't an eighth grade girl, but he just seems to really, really understand what. Yeah,
the way that Sorry, you're cutting in and out a little bit there. That's all.
Oh, sorry. Yeah. No. Yeah.
So
you're good to go.
Okay, cool. Yeah. Because your connection, I even said on my Skype at one point, poor network connection. So I'm glad that you're recording on your side, because it's like cutting in and out a little bit. Yeah. This is this is the same thing that happens with Adam, I take it. Let me just get back into that.
No, you're good.
Okay, cool. So the way that the film kind of uses technology, I mean, you already mentioned her YouTube videos and the way that it kind of gives us a way for her to vocalize her psyche, and it gives us a way into her head without having to have some cliche like best friend character or something, which would betray the kind of the fundamental isolationism of that period of your life. I thought that was a really smart way to do that, because I mean that is a lot of times, we live in a YouTube culture. We live in everyone wants to be heard, and they reach out by making YouTube videos, or by, as you see in the film, surfing social media and liking things and just like posting pictures of themselves. And I thought it's not everyone does it in this respect, but for Kayla, I think in very much is just a kind of not a cry for help, just like a cry to be heard. Like she doesn't feel like anybody is paying attention to her, and which is again something we could all relate to. And I think that the way that he used technology in the film, I think really highlighted that beautifully.
Totally. This film is almost revolutionary in the way it uses technology. Like I'm so sick of in movies when it's like, oh, kids are on their phones, like, oh man, kids can't connect with the world because they're on their phones and technology, rah, Black Mirror, but this movie, its thesis, I guess, is that, our relationship, and specifically, this generation's relationship with technology, is so complex and so multifaceted. Like, yes, Kayla's always on her phone and she's, not connecting with her dad, but she wouldn't be connecting with her dad even if there were no phone, like it's just a tool for her to do something that she would be naturally doing, even if she didn't have it. And on the plus side, her videos are this strange way of her communicating with herself and her trying to process her own experiences, that even though nobody is watching them except for probably her dad, there's this shot where you see her YouTube page and there's one view on each video. And it was just this powerful realization where I was like, that one view is probably her dad, and that's both sad and beautiful at the same time.
Exactly.
But she's in doing that, she's learning about herself and gaining her voice and growing. Even the way she talks to the camera at the beginning of the movie and the way she talks to the camera at the end of the movie are so drastically different. She's learned so much about how to talk about herself. It's helping her gain a sense of self-awareness, even as she's, there's this barrier between her and herself that she's constantly trying to break down.
Yeah. I think, and, Fisher's performance, and it's funny because I looked up her IMDb. She's not really done that much. I mean, I think primarily before this she was the voice of the small girl in Despicable Me, the first two. The one who's like, it's so fluffy. Yeah.
Oh, that one? That's her?
That's her from
oh my gosh,
8 years ago or 9 years ago, whenever that movie came out.
Wow.
And, she gives such a grounded performance, and just from all the nuance that you were bringing to it, the way that she slouches. And we watched, my wife and I watched the movie. I'd seen it before, so I watched it for the second time the other night, and we watched some of the featurettes and things like that on the Blu-ray. And she's talking about how the movie was really the product of a true collaboration between Fisher and Burnham, and how she she's slouch in her real life. And so she brought things to the character like that, just from her to really sell her the physical appearance that she's actually is this average 13-year-old girl, not like a Hollywood version of what a teenager is, where you'd see in a lot of, most teen movies these days. And, I mean, just the very beginning, it kind of pulls in on her, and she's got the acne and everything that everyone has at that age. I thought that was
stumbling over her words and everything, saying
like
every
I know
other word.
That actually bothered me the first 30 seconds of the movie. I'm like, okay, she's gonna do that the whole time. But then I was like, well, but that's how teenagers talk. And you notice she doesn't talk like that when she's telling her dad to leave her alone at the dinner table or anything else. Her speech patterns change depending on who she's talking to, because that's how real life is. That's how people really talk.
My favorite little factoid from this movie is that in Bo Burnham's original script, everybody was chatting over Facebook, they would chat over Facebook Messenger, and when the actress, when she read the script for the first time, she told him, she was like, nobody talks over Facebook anymore. That only old people do that. and he was baffled because he comes from my generation, and we always talk over Facebook. We don't talk in any other way. Whereas she was like, no. People my age, it's all DMs on Instagram and on Snapchat. And, so everybody in the movie is communicating via DMs on Instagram, which I hate because I hate DMs on Instagram, but felt so authentic in ways that other movies about technology don't feel. I feel like other movies about technology, the technology is always being used in ways that you don't really use it. It works in ways that it doesn't actually work. Whereas with this whole movie, the way she browses the internet and the way she talks with people over Snapchat and over Instagram, it's just not a single moment of it rung false, at least for me. Knowing people who communicate like that, I was like, wow, that is exactly how it works to a T, which is both scary and really cool at the same time.
And a lot of the filmmaking really, really helps you sort of feel like you're seeing the world through from her perspective. I mean, the fact that at the pool party, which she's getting ready and the camera pulls out and you see the vast kind of, everyone partying out there and how alone she feels or
I love that shot. Yeah.
It's great. Or every time Aiden walks in and it slows down and as watching it. With the music, watching it as an adult, I'm like, this guy seems like a dick, which somebody even tells her that he is at one point. But, she sees it. That's how it feels when you have a crush on someone. Every time they enter your space, like everything kind of freezes and your heart starts beating faster and things like that. So I thought, it's really the insight that Burnham has into what it's like to be this age. I mean, to be a girl or to be this age at all, I thought was really kind of profound from a first-time filmmaker. And I think I saw earlier today he got the National Board of Review, like best director of a first-time feature or whatever like that. And it's completely deserved. I mean, he does incredible work here for someone that's never been really behind a camera before.
Yeah, I know he did get a WGA Writers Guild nomination, which I'm very, very thankful for. Although I'm very curious to read this script because I wonder how much of that was written and how much of that was improvised. Just because, yeah, well, like when like that opening video with her talking to the camera, like reading a block of text with like written between every single word, or writing that must be. But I don't know. Maybe he did completely write this whole thing out, and if he did, that's extremely impressive. But yeah, I mean, like just watching it feels very much like a synthesis, like a collaboration between somebody who has a distance from 8th grade and between somebody who's going through it. Like it's both critical of Kayla and completely in her wavelength and completely empathetic with her. And that's what makes a really, really good character study, is the ability to step back and, make statements and make an observation about a character who's imperfect and struggling with something, while also completely putting you in their shoes and saying, no, this is what it's like. This is what they're going through. This is why they're making the decisions that they're making. Like Aiden's a great example. Like you're right. Like you can tell right from the get-go that this kid is just horrible, I guess. And yet, that the combination of the slow motion and the music and the look on her face whenever she sees him, you understand and empathize with that crush so deeply that it actually really hurts when you find out just how much of a dick he is. Like there's that scene where, she's trying to talk to him and trying to and the only way she can get his attention is by saying that she's got like dirty photos on her phone, and you just ate. It's just like there was just such this pain watching that, because I'm like, no, you deserve so much better than him. But I completely understand why you're doing this, because this is the biggest conversation you've had with a boy probably ever. And, this is a big deal for you. So that's what really makes this film special, is that distance and intimacy.
Well, not only that scene with Aiden, I mean, the scene in the car with what's his name, Riley or whatever, that was harrowing, because I'm watching it the first time. I'm like, is Kayla about to just get raped or something like right now? Like what is happening? Yeah. And because, she has that, she's trying to go along with it to seem cool or whatever, especially since she's found a new best friend in Olivia. And, he's trying to push it as far as he can, and thankfully she at least stands up enough for herself to be like, no, I don't really feel comfortable doing that, even though he then spins it back around and she's apologizing on the way back. I'm like, Jesus.
Gosh. I've seen a lot of horror movies this year, but that was probably the scariest scene in a movie I saw all year. There's been a lot of talk and a lot of attention brought to sexual abuse over the last several years,
for sure.
Especially since the Weinstein scandal. We're now starting to realize just the depth of this problem that we have in society, specifically in Hollywood society. But that scene really put you in the shoes of somebody experiencing that in a really personal and terrifying way that even me, who's known people who've been abused and whatnot, really didn't I don't feel like I really understood what that feels like until that scene. And it was terrifying. It was just very, very scary to watch her go through something like that. You keep wanting her to be wanting her to stop or get out of the car or whatever, but also, understanding the dangerous and precarious situation that she's in. It's just very, very harrowing. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and that scene really stood out for me for that reason, just because, you know, I've heard a lot of people kind of say that this film is a horror movie in a way, and
it is.
It kind of is. I mean, you know, this is, in a lot of ways, this movie is kind of about me at this age, like, you know, being at a big gathering and feeling like you don't belong, and calling your parents to come and pick you up because you don't know, you know, how to conduct yourself, or because you're scared to face the judgment of your peers and things like that, or you know, it's really, I mean, in a lot of ways it really hit home. And for me now, because we have a little girl who's just turned 2 last month, being the father of a daughter, I really related to the dad character played by Josh Hamilton as well. Yeah. So it's like kind of that final moment with the two of them, to me, it's kind of like I'm relating to both sides of this argument. And so it's kind of that much more impactful.
That scene where her dad sort of like, you know, she basically takes the time capsule and burns it out back, and it's this great line where he's like, what was in there? And she's like, my hopes and dreams. And just, you know, I mean, obviously, like, I look at that, I'm like, oh, you're just being dramatic, but just like the pain on his face when she says that is just so real. Like, that's when I really realized just how great of a movie this was, that it wasn't just a movie that was speaking to me, but like a genuinely great piece of filmmaking, because like I can't really empathize with the dad character because I'm not a dad. Like, I've never been in that position. I don't have a daughter. And yet I totally know what he's feeling in that scene where, you know, you love this person so much, and you see this light in them, and you're just seeing that get slowly extinguished, and there's just nothing you can do about it. You know, it's like, even though I personally, as Jackson Smith, like, don't know what that feels like, I felt every single emotion in that moment. And that is a testament to great filmmaking.
Yeah, and I think Hamilton's performance in that scene, I mean, I'm surprised after I watched the movie, I was surprised that I hadn't heard anybody really talking about him in the awards conversation or anything, because I think he's really great and very understated, because he has to toe this line between being concerned, showing he cares, but not overstepping his bounds, and like, you know, the whole thing with the knocking on the door at night and just like at the dinner table, like all of that stuff. I think it's a very, you know, if you tip it one way, it becomes a cliche, but then if you play it too much in the other direction, you know, he might seem like a shitty parent. But watching it as watching it as an adult now, especially now being a parent myself, it's like he really finds the way to kind of give us a hint behind the dad's true intentions without really sacrificing the fact that this is Kayla's story and we're telling it from her perspective.
Totally. Yeah, it is frustrating to be watching this awards season and not see him or Fisher really get the attention that they deserve, you know. And I think a lot of that's because they're both actors who have done things. I mean, they've both been in things and been in popular things before, but they're not like actors in the way that like Timothée Chalamet or Christian Bale are actors. So it's like you see those people end up filling up the categories in these award shows, whereas these really, really incredible performances from actors you might not recognize or know the names of are just operating on a whole nother level of quality. I mean, yeah, like that scene between them, there's just so much going on, and, you know, so much going on beneath the surface of what they're saying that is just really, really, really impressive.
Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, just also the production design in the film, because I made a lot of notes about that, like just like the little details, like the assembly with like the mic feedback and at the assembly, or like the sex ed videos. Like there's a lot. There's like it feels like everybody's high school, you know, or middle school, I guess, at this point. And I mean, I think a lot of those details really help to bring you into the world.
It's something that just a personal thing. My dad's a production designer, so I grew up sort of always paying attention to that aspect of movies. A lot of the movies I was shown when I was a kid were sort of big production design movies. I knew what Brazil was before like anybody knew what Brazil was. My age at least. Like so it's always something I notice, and even when it's really subtle, it contributes so perfectly to the story. Like that pool party, just as an example, is, every single detail about it is so true to what pool parties like that are actually like, yet feels heightened in a way that gets the point across and gets you into Kayla's perspective. Like going back to that one shot where she's sort of standing inside watching the pool party play out, and she doesn't want to go outside. Like it's this combination of this music, which sounds like circus music, and then like everybody's like doing handstands and like throwing this beach ball around and like doing like, there's this kid doing that weird thing with his eyes that like there's that kid at every pool party, and it's like you feel like you're in a circus, like you feel like you're in this freak show, but you're not in a freak show. You're just in your average everyday pool party. And that's great design. It's great directing. It's great world building in a way. Like there's a lot of world building in this movie, even though it's what they're building is a world that actually exists.
Right. And I mean, Fisher says so much with so few words in the film. And then it's really, like you were saying, with the details of what's happening in the pool party. To me, it really feels it's just like, it's all the nuances of real life that you don't think about when you watch movies, because they're never there, that you never see, captured. And it's a little frustrating, I think, as being a fan of that kind of film, seeing all the hype and attention that movies like Green Book or Bohemian Rhapsody or even A Star Is Born, which I like fine, but I don't love as much as so many other people, just because
the first 45 minutes are better than
oh man
movie,
okay yeah, let's talk about that for a second. So the beginning scene, like with her in the hallway and then or in the alleyway, and then him going to the drag show, and their meeting, their conversations outside on the outside in front of the convenience store or whatever. All of that was like perfect, and I was totally with it all the way up through Shallow, through that moment, which was so epic in the trailer. You're getting chills watching the trailer. We're like, holy shit, this could be amazing. And then after that, I feel like the whole film really deflated and kind of went off in all kinds of different directions that were less interesting to me. Yeah, basically. It's like they had something really going there.
I think that's a weirdly a good example to talk about in relation to what makes this movie good, because like the parts that worked about A Star Is Born for me were the parts that felt so authentic. Like I love that. Like my favorite scene in the movie is like when they go to the grocery store so he can get the frozen peas for her swelling hand, just because it felt so real. But then those moments were sort of punctuated by things like my least favorite scene in the movie is really the first scene in the movie. It's like he gets into his limo, and he pulls out a flask, or he pulls out an actual bottle of alcohol, and it felt like the movie was screaming at the top of its lungs at me, the audience, he's an alcoholic.
In case you couldn't tell.
It was not. In case you couldn't tell, it was not subtle. It didn't feel real necessarily. It was driving a point home without subtlety or nuance. And by contrast, this movie, again, it's much less epic in scope. It doesn't have Bradley Cooper and Lady Gaga in it, but there is not a moment in this movie that rings false. Every little bit is just it feels so true and so true to the characters.
Yeah, and the middle school as the setting is so perfect, because that is, as she says at one point, she even says that, middle school is, in the middle, because it's emblematic of this time in your life where you don't really belong anywhere. And on one of the featurettes, Fisher says, we're not kids, we're not adults. And a lot of times she sees movies where teenagers are talking like adults, or they're being portrayed as just
kids.
And it's kind of its own subset that really I can't really even think off the top of my head. I can't really think of a film that conveys what it's like to be that age really at all, let alone as well as this one.
It's because I think the reason for that is because it is such a complex part of somebody's life. Like when you're in elementary school, you are a kid, and when you're in high school, you are a teenager, and both of those things bring with it, certain ways of speech and certain behaviors that, apply to pretty much everyone. It is weirdly easy to make a movie about high school, because it's high school sucks. Everybody sucks. The end. As long as you've sort of accepted that premise, you can sort of get away with anything and have some level of authenticity. Whereas middle school is just inherently filled with so much complexity. Like, yeah, you are an adult and not an adult. You know, you have self-awareness and yet you don't have any self-awareness. Like, you're cool and yet you're not cool at all. You know, and that's what makes it, it's what makes it painful. It's what makes it important for people. And it's what makes it really, really hard to get right in movies. And the reason I think so many movies just don't tackle it at all.
Yeah. And this film, I think, it nicely kind of does the before and after a little bit, because you do see, as we mentioned, we get kind of a little glimpse into, I guess, what was it, like a 10, 11-year-old Kayla. We get a little bit of that, like in the audio when she gets the time capsule and all that. And then through Olivia, we kind of get a glimpse into the future where she's telling Kayla, like, oh, you know, middle school was the worst. You know, I think you're cool and you'll get through it and all that, kind of trying to mentor her. And I'm watching the movie and being like, man, I really wish I knew somebody like Olivia when I was this age, because that would have been extremely helpful. Of course, you know, being that age, you don't really, you're kind of tuned out to most other voices. I mean, like, as you saw in the movie, her dad knows her better than anybody, and she's just not interested in anything he has to say, because you're so lost in your own thoughts and everything. And speaking to your comparison of how it's just so much easier to make films about high school, I mean, this film almost kind of flirts with a little bit of like an American Pie moment with the banana. And then totally, you know, dials it back so it feels realistic, not like over the top and ridiculous like that film goes with it. But I just thought that was kind of a funny moment that occurred there that was worth mentioning.
Wow, I totally did not make the American Pie connection, but that's exactly what it's that scene, but like actually, like it's that scene, but like,
and from a female perspective too.
Yeah, exactly. I do want to talk about Olivia for a second, because she was actually one of my favorite parts of this movie. Like, talk about a character who there's a lot of nuance to. Like, when you meet Olivia, because Olivia is this high schooler who's part of this high school mentor program, who sort of takes Kayla under her wing. But there's this little section of movie where you're not quite sure whether she's like actually friends with Kayla or she just feels sorry for Kayla. And that really felt true to me as somebody who, you know, had a lot of older mentors in middle school. You know, like I was in youth group in middle school, so I had like all these youth pastors who I was quote unquote friends with, and they were like friends with me, and, you know, we sort of had this friend relationship, but it was also not that at all, because it was very obviously somebody taking pity on me and somebody you know, trying to get me involved with myself. And Olivia, just like, that character was written in such a way to where she represented that so perfectly. Like, another one of my favorite moments in the film, which just flies by and you really don't notice it if you're not paying attention, but it's when, you know, they're driving back from the mall and she says to the guy, I think Riley's his name, she's like, oh, let's go drop her off first. And he's like, why? Your house is right here. And it's in that moment that I realize, oh no, she knows exactly what's going to happen. Like, she knows exactly what's going to happen when Riley gets Kayla alone in the car with him, and she does not trust him. And that's why she's like, no, we're going to drive Kayla home first. And yet when Kayla says like, oh, I'm fine, it'll be totally cool, like, she believes her. She believes that she's going to be able to defend herself and that she's going to be okay. So, you know, you have this character who's, you know, who trusts Kayla but doesn't trust Kayla, who's friends with Kayla but not quite friends with Kayla. And it's just, it really speaks to that complexity.
And it's easy to see how, you know, Kayla would be calling, because she calls her, I think, the same day that she gets her number, or like the next year, right? So Kayla's, you know, obviously feeling uncomfortable about calling Olivia, and it's easy to see in another movie Olivia like on the other line, just kind of rolling her eyes, like, oh man, this kid's like calling me up, or And I don't think it really, you know, but when she shows up at the mall and they hug, and it seems she plays it completely genuine. And I think it's,
I mean, like, everybody kind of wishes they had an Olivia, like somebody who did, like, was willing to, you know, be friends with you and suffer through your awkwardness and still love you no matter what. But somebody who is still a high schooler and who is still, you know, has this growing up to do themselves.
Exactly.
And that's why she really needs her dad. You know, I think the lesson that Kayla really learns at the end of the movie is that she has this resource there. She has a friend really in her dad who she she really didn't know was there the whole time. And I think, that it was another part of the movie that hurt for me personally, because like I think my parents were also trying to communicate with me and connect with me during that time. And I was also sort of not listening. Like I wanted friends, but I didn't want my parent as a friend. What the movie sort of is saying is that, no, your parent is your best friend. Your parent is always your best friend, or at least supposed to be.
Yeah, no. And then, I 100% agree. And I, being that age, I had a similar kind of experience where my parents were like, if you need help, if you need anything, if you're whatever. And I was like, okay, of course you're going to say that. You're my parents. I need to figure this out on myself, or, whatever. And because you feel like it's you against the world when you're that age. And watching it now as an adult who is a parent, especially, it's you see just how the things that are when you're 13 or anywhere in your teenagers, really, how when you're that age, the things that are so important, she gets the call from Olivia to hang out at the mall, and it's like, oh my God, like it's the world opens up to her. It's just like the biggest, most important thing that's ever happened. And
I thought she was going to start crying when that happened. Like there's that shot afterwards where she hangs out with Olivia, and you just like, it's just like finding water in a desert.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. But when you're that age, everything feels that monumental. It's not until you get older and you're like, oh, okay, that was whatever. Like, you realize, you think you have one shot at life to figure things out, and you feel like it is this moment. This is her only time to possibly get a boyfriend or to make friends or things like that. And then ultimately, I like the way that dynamic ends with when Gabe comes into the picture, where she's like, you know what, this guy seems nice. He's trying to reach out to me. They have hanging out with chicken nuggets and stuff. And I think there's a moment in the featurette that I keep referencing where Burnham is saying about how that's kind of what he's trying to communicate with that scene, is that when you're that age, everything feels like it's the end of the world. But ultimately, you're 13, relax, calm the fuck down, enjoy yourself, and have some chicken nuggets. Yeah, basically, you're still a kid. Like, don't rush things. I mean, especially in the course of the film where Kayla is like, been asked, she gives blowjobs and like being propositioned by a high schooler, things like that. It's like, you don't have to worry about all of that stuff now if you don't want to. Just calm down and relax.
Be a kid. Yeah,
exactly.
I do have a confession to make. I was Gabe, literally, like that. Like wearing goggles to the pool party, serving chicken nuggets to your play date, like that was probably the most uncomfortable part of the movie for me, because like I was that awkward kid. I like one of my favorite moments is when he leaves his archary certificate out on the table for
that. Yeah.
And then he's like, oh, this is nothing. Like,
how'd this get here?
That was just totally it was just totally something 13-year-old Jackson would do. But like that's what makes Gabe so cool in the movie, is because he is just a kid. Like, he is exactly what a 13-year-old boy should be. And that's why I think why they're able to connect in such a pure way, is because they're not trying to be high schoolers. They're like, no, this is where we're at in our lives right now. I do archery camp. That's cool. We watch Rick and Morty. That's cool. And it was such a, that scene, that playdate scene was such a breath of fresh air, because you're like, oh, that's exactly what it's like and what it should be like,
Agreed. And the movie kind of addresses, like, I think the fact that, we talked about technology a lot and how it plays such a pivotal role for teenagers now. And it kind of, I think, mentions during the mall scene, they're talking about how the high schoolers, Olivia's friends, are saying about how Kayla is almost like another generation, because they got Snapchat or at different points in their life and things like that. And it is kind of, I think, a testament to the fact that kids are growing up much faster because of what they have, the technology and the information that they have available to them. They can go online and literally learn about anything. Whereas when you're a kid, prior to the internet, you had life more doled out, and it's things happened in their own time, as opposed to all at once. Here's everything about the world if you want to know it at the age of 13.
I'm really glad you mentioned that, because that was another thing that stood out to me about the movie was, how, like we've been saying, how similar the movie was to our experiences in 8th grade from different generations, but also how different it was. Like one of the most striking scenes in the movie for me is when they have a school shooting drill.
Yep.
I didn't have that. Like when I was in middle school, and I was in middle school relatively recently compared to the grand scheme of things, but we never had school shooting drills. Like that is probably totally a thing that's come about in the last 10 years. And it's very scary. Like that was very scary. And yeah, the fact that they're communicating with each other over Snapchat and talking about sending each other dirty photos, like that's not something I or anybody in my middle school experience had to deal with at all. But at the same time, like the element of wanting to grow up and wanting to, pretend like you're older than you actually are, and sort of dabbling in sex and drugs and whatever, like that is something that, was part of my middle school experience, even without the Snapchat or the whatever. Like that I think is just a universal truth about that age, is that you're always wanting to, like, oh yeah, I give great blowjobs. Or it's like you don't even know what a blowjob is.
Exactly. I love the follow-up moment where she's Googling how to give a blowjob. I mean, she's like, goes back, how to give a good blowjob, to be specific.
Well, another thing, like, you like, for instance, if me in 8th grade, I wanted to look something like that up. Like, we had one computer that the whole family shared.
Yeah.
I couldn't look that up. Everybody would see it. But the fact that she's got her own laptop, her own phone, like she can be looking these things up and getting this information without anybody but her knowing. That's a little scary. I mean, if I were a parent, I would
parental locks or something. Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah,
it's ironic in a way that, like, the story that the film tells is pretty timeless, but in the trappings that we're talking about, who knows where we're going to be technologically in that decade. Snapchat may not even exist, and it talks about YouTube and even the school shooting drills that you were mentioning, like that. It's very much now that's an issue that this country is facing now at this moment, not when I was in middle school or when you were in middle school. So it feels like, in a way, while the story will keep the film relevant and probably help it endure, in a way, kind of the surface level of Kayla's story feels very much like a time capsule in and of itself.
It is a time capsule in and of itself. Yeah, no, it is kind of like the shoebox at the center of the film, where you're there's so much truth in it, and there's so much truth about what it was like being in middle school in 2018. And yet, yeah, people will look at it probably 10 years from now, maybe even 5 years from now, man, like, and say like, wow, that's what it was like at that time. And yeah, that's what it was like,
Yeah, I mean, you look back a few years ago, we had a MySpace joke at the beginning of an Iron Man movie. And,
oh my gosh, yeah.
And now it's like, MySpace? What's that? Like, kids today probably don't even know what that is anymore. It's
that was
things
even
are moving.
Before my time. Yeah.
Yeah.
I remember when I got to middle school. I remember when I was in middle school, that even then it was like, that was kind of, MySpace was kind of like the Facebook Messenger of this movie, where it was like, oh, only old people use MySpace. And now it's like, yeah, kids these days probably don't even know what MySpace is.
Exactly.
Things are moving very fast. Yeah.
It's crazy. And then I wanted to say, I like the technique in the film where there's no sound after the car ride back with Riley and that whole thing, where she feels kind of dejected and, actually kind of self-defeating. Like she's beating herself up about having been the subject of basically an alleged sexual assault. And she's making the video of, taking a break from making videos. Basically, it's like we hear her audio over the images of her just kind of sitting around, and like it's there's sort of a separation of what she's saying and what she's doing, and it's not we're not in that moment with her where she's making the video, because she feels like it kind of pulled back and pulled out of herself, I guess, even more so. What did you think that moment was supposed to kind of signify?
Yeah, no, the technical aspects of the filmmaking in this movie are very subtle yet very profound. Like even going back to that first shot in the movie, which is literally just you start on a very, very grainy close up of her webcam footage, and you're pulling back, and it's almost like this symbolic, like pulling back and gaining this perspective on her life. And there's all of these different, like another one of those sort of mixes of audio and sound and visuals that really spoke well to the theme in this movie was how it visualizes her surfing the internet. Like it does this really, really cool thing where you'll start looking at a shot of her on her phone, and then it'll sort of bleed into a shot of the screen, but only so much that you're still getting like her eyes over the screen. And it's just this very, like, if you just pull a screenshot out of any one of those sequences, it's just, even that is just such a beautiful representation of what surfing the internet is like. I mean, every movie that deals with technologies has this hurdle to overcome where you're like, okay, well, how do we actually show people surfing the internet or on their phones or texting or whatever, because it's a very uncinematic thing. And part of what Bo Burnham did as a director that was so clever was turning something that inherently uncinematic into something cerebral and surreal and wonderful. Like even playing Sail Away over that whole sequence was just really, really, it was funny, but it's like that's how it feels. That's how it's like.
Yeah. Have you seen Searching, by the way? Speaking of the whole
I have
digital
not seen Searching. I know I really want to. I've heard that movie uses it in a really clever way.
Yeah, I feel like we're on the verge of seeing a lot more films trying to capture, the role that technology plays in our lives, and Searching does it in a very, obviously it's a very specific way. I think they're calling it, I think the filmmakers are calling it Screen Life, where basically, for people listening that don't know, basically the whole film is told from the perspective of John Cho's character's screen as he's like, windows opening up for video chats and doing Google searches and like Gmail and all that stuff. And so I think we're kind of on maybe the beginning of like a little bit of a renaissance as far as films that use technology and depict it on screen in like new and interesting ways.
Because it's like, yeah, it's a matter of thinking outside of the box. Like, I don't know if necessarily we'll see more movies like Searching that do that have that gimmick of like, oh, the whole movie's just set on the screen. But I think what we're going to see is a lot more movies that, use it, and represent it in thrilling cinematic ways. Another example, which is a weird example, but like Sherlock, I know, like, like there's so much texting in that show, and I always loved like the ways that they'll sort of like put the texting up on screen without like actually just showing a shot of a phone. It's when you encounter a new element, whether it be technology or whatever, as a filmmaker, you have to find a way not only to make it interesting and fun, but also sort of integrate it thematically with the plot. Like right. Kayla is tied to her phone and her technology is her way of seeing herself, so that you have all these shots in the movie where it's just the phone in her eyes. It just, like I said, it speaks to that theme very, very well. Yeah, absolutely. There's a couple other things I wanted to mention before we start sort of getting into the final thoughts and things like that. They never really address 100% what happened with Kayla's mom, which I thought was, again, very realistic. Yeah,
like you're not going to say, oh, when your mom died 7 years ago from that car accident. It's like it's not a soap opera. They kind of leave it open to interpretation, where she's like, I think the only mention we get is the dad says something like, oh, after your mom left, whatever that meant.
Yeah.
I thought that was a kind of a smart way of handling that. And then I love the misdirect at the end where you see Aiden walking down the hallway and Kayla follows him. Yeah. Kayla follows him, and then you're like, oh man, is she going to be like, here's some dirty photos for you? Or like, how is this going to play out? And it ultimately ends up being with the confrontation of Kennedy basically ignoring her thank you note and kind of dismissing her. And I love it's just a small little thing in the movie that her friend Stephanie, when she goes over and gives her gives Kennedy that note.
Yeah.
And she's like, and Kayla's like, hey, Steph. And she's like, what? And he just looks up like really confused. Like, it makes me laugh. That was a great way of depicting kind of how out of touch with reality a lot of times we can be. And I'm I'm in my 30s and I can just as easily get lost in my phone, where my wife will say something like, "I'm sorry, honey, what was that? I was reading some tweet or whatever." So I thought that was just a really great way to kind of get that across. Is there anything specifically that we haven't brought up yet that you wanted to make sure we mention?
I'm really happy you mentioned that scene at the end where she sort of confronts Kennedy, because like, yeah, I mean, Kennedy is so mean and passive to her in a way that like is very simple, but also like you get like, yeah, I mean, Kayla is, a little awkward in discovering herself, so maybe she's a little bit of a hard pill to swallow, but like Kennedy has no right to just be that mean to her. And the fact that and just how she stands up to her at the end of the movie, and the fact that she did was just such a gratifying thing for me as a moviegoer. Like I almost just like stood up and clapped after she gives that monologue, just because, I mean, it took guts, it takes guts to, confront somebody, but she really needed to. And I think that was something that Kennedy really needed to hear. And I can only hope going forward that that's something that'll mean something to her later on. Wow, I wasn't nice to that girl. And, wow, I should have gotten off my phone and connected with her, or should have invited her to my pool party.
Should have given that card game a chance that she gave me for my birthday.
Yeah, exactly. Oh man, yeah. I another weird small thing, but there's that shot when you're, Kennedy's opening all of her birthday presents, and you have this wide shot of the table, and just like in the bottom like left hand corner, there's just this person sleeping, and it's just like, if you're not really paying attention, you won't pick up on it, or you won't notice it. But there's so much going on in every frame of the movie, and that's what, that's what sets really, really great movies apart from just good ones, is the director thinking about every little aspect of the frame, and like, oh, what's going on in the foreground? What's going on in the background? How is the world existing outside of what we're just seeing or what we're just hearing? Like there's also that scene there's also that sound bit in that scene where you hear the dad bringing the cake out, and the mom's like yelling at him, like, no, not yet. He's like, I woke up at like 3 in the goddamn morning to get this cake. And then it just cuts away from it. Like you never hear anything about that ever again. It never becomes important, but it just makes the world feel so authentic.
Yeah.
And even makes you probably understand and sympathize with Kennedy a little bit, because like her family life her family life's probably not as good as Kayla's is. Like, right. Kayla's probably got a much healthier household than Kennedy has, and that, that speaks to their characters and speaks to, how they interact with each other and how they interact with themselves.
Yeah, no, I love the way that she confronts her, and it gives us enough of an understanding of what that means for Kayla, because we've been living in this space with her, but then she immediately walks away. So we don't even know what Kennedy's reaction was. And ultimately the movie is basically saying it doesn't matter what Kennedy thinks. Kayla stood up for herself, spoke up and asserted herself. And like she says in the movie, confidence is a choice. And she chose to walk over to her and to speak up and, kind of put her foot down, I guess, with that. So yeah, that's definitely one of my favorite moments in the movie. You get a little. Is Kayla
it's all about her taking her own advice. Like
yeah,
she ends up taking all the advice that she gives to everybody in her videos, and I think that's really beautiful.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we get that catharsis at the end, and it's a hopeful note, but it's not exactly saying all her problems are solved, because that again would betray the tone and the kind of the aesthetic of this film. But she has kind of a renewed sense of, like she says in the movie, just because things are happening to you now doesn't mean that they're always going to happen to you that way. It's like change is good. Yeah. She mentions basically you take everything she says, like you said, basically say everything she says in her videos and directly apply it to her story. Of course that happens in the end, which she kind of puts the button on this period of her life.
Mm-hmm. I love that last line of the movie where she says, "Can't wait to be you." Like,
it's great.
That just, that was just really, that was something I wish I had said to myself at that age. And just a really, really hopeful way to end the movie without saying explicitly like, "Oh, this is a happy ending." It's a hopeful ending.
Right. Exactly.
It's a cathartic ending.
Right. Yeah, I think that's perfect for the perfect way to wrap the film up. So, going into final thoughts, I would normally I'd ask like, does this film hold up? Because this podcast could cover films from whenever, but this literally just came out last year. So what would you say?
I mean, we'll see how it holds up.
I hope I'm doing what I told you. I showed my wife. I let a friend borrow my Blu-ray of it, and I'm doing what I can to spread the word about this great film, and hopefully more people can only gain in esteem down the line. And I was vaguely familiar with Bo Burnham before this. I'm not really up on stand up like I should be these days, but I'm definitely curious to see not only what he does next, but also as a film director, but also I'm kind of planning on going back and listening to his stand up and seeing if I can pick up on some of what he's done there and how maybe that fed into his work in this film.
Totally. Yeah. I mean, he was I think I actually don't really know as much about Bo Burnham as I should. I mean, I've seen some of his stand up and some of his music, but he started out as a YouTuber, and he gained popularity on YouTube. So it makes sense that he would do a movie that's kind of about YouTubing and about putting yourself out there online, since that's how he got famous. So the movie is almost like him processing his own it feels like it's him processing his own relationship to technology and to the internet and to fame and all of these things that have been very key to his success as a filmmaker. So yeah, I definitely would. I want to go back and watch his stand-up specials. I wanted to do it before this podcast so I could talk about it a little bit, but I didn't have time, so I'm definitely going to go back and watch them now.
So Jackson, what would you say to people to recommend this film to them? Like, why should they watch this?
I mean, like I said, I think it's a great portrait of the here and now. It's a great portrait of what growing up now is like, just as in kind of an ethnographical sense, and just kind of like this is what it's like. You should be aware of what's going on, but at the same time, it's one of those movies where I feel like everybody could watch it and take away, just at one point in the movie, be able to say, oh, I know how that feels. Even if you're not have never been a 13-year-old girl or never even been to middle school. Like Adam didn't go to middle school. I'm trying to get him to watch this movie because I'm like, no, you trust me, you will empathize with it. Even if you haven't been to a pool party, or if you haven't done such and such, you're still going to be able to pull some aspect of this movie. There's still going to, I think, be an aspect of this movie that speaks to you. So that's kind of why I've recommended it to so many people, is like, trust me, I think you're going to like this. And even if you don't like it, I think it's going to mean something and speak to you in a really meaningful way. Like, there's a reason this is one of the best reviewed movies of the year. Like, I think most everybody who saw it was able to say, like, wow, that was true and pure and meant something to me as a moviegoer.
Yeah, no, it's the emotions behind it, I think, that really resonate. Whether then you separate the fact that it's a teenager, or it's a girl, or it's a middle school, or whatever, it's that feeling of not feeling like you belong and trying to find your way. It's basically like self-discovery is essentially what it's about. And everybody can relate to that, regardless of whether or not they had the same experiences that Kayla had. And I mean, I 100% agree with everything you said. And I kind of, while I was watching it the second time, I kind of was, the fact that the film captures this period so well and kind of takes you through it and offers a light at the end of the tunnel, it to me really felt like it's something that should be required viewing, kind of for, when if you're a parent of a kid and they're like 12, 13, show them this movie, because maybe they'll shrug it off and be like, this is boring. I want to go on surf the internet or whatever. But maybe it'll help give them a little more perspective onto what that this is a chapter in their life, and that there are, that they aren't done becoming who they're going to be. And I think that's an important message. And ironically, the film is rated R, so it's not something that schools can show to kids, and the teachers can't show this to their students or anything because of that. But I think they should be able to, because it's without that kind of raw texture to it, it would feel inauthentic, and it would feel Hollywoodized.
Totally. That was, I remember, controversial, actually, when the movie got rated R, because I know Bo Burnham and everybody at A24 was really upset, because they were like, well, now everybody who the movie's about is not going to be able to see the movie. Yeah. I mean, I have so many problems with the Ratings Association, which is a whole nother podcast in and of itself. But that was, it was definitely frustrating, because I think like you said, that message of making peace with yourself and loving yourself at that age and loving your voice even when it's not fully refined is just so important. And that we spiral into those holes of loneliness and depression and self-hatred at that age, I firmly believe causes a lot of problems later in life. So I do really think the people that this movie's about should also be seeing it and should be allowed to see it.
Yeah, and except for some sexual references here and there, there's not even really that much language, if that's their big beef with it.
Yeah, it's like they say blowjob, like come on, guys.
Exactly. So I think that pretty much wraps up the conversation on 8th grade. Jackson, where can people find you online on social media, etc.? Which is funny that we're mentioning this whole podcast, how important that is to the movie. But where can people that are 13 years old and wanting to follow our work and can find us online?
I'm on Twitter at Jackson C. Smith 95. I'm on Instagram as Jackson S. _95. If you're listening to this and if you like podcasts and sort of film criticism, really where you should check me out is YouTube. Like Robert said, Adam and I, we have our Screen Fever YouTube channel. Just type in Screen Fever. There you can find our home experience podcast. We've done a lot of discussions on different types of movies and TV that we really like. I'm starting to get into video essays, which has been a whole lot of fun. Sort of emulating the Lindsay Ellis, Bob Chipman model. Just editing fun videos about, movies and TV shows that I really like. I've got another one of those coming up in the next couple of weeks. So yeah, be sure to check me out on there. Screen Fever on YouTube.
Yeah, I've seen some of the work you guys are doing over there, and it's really great. The video essays are amazing. So keep that coming.
Oh, thank you.
If you're interested in joining me on the show to chat about one of your favorite films, head on over to crookedtable.com/guest. Or you can consider supporting the show at patreon.com/crookedtable. Of course, you can always find more podcasts, reviews, videos, and other movie-related goodies over at crookedtable.com. Until next time, this has been the Crooked Table Podcast, and I've been Rob.
This has been a production of crookedtable.com. All rights reserved.
CROOKED.